Welcome to our conversation today on research for impact. Wherever you're listening from, we're glad to have you with us today. My name's Heidi Braun, and I'm a senior program officer working with Canada's International Development Research Centre. And so we'll just take a minute to interview the other fine folks who are with us today. Yele, do you want to go first?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jelle. I'm a professor of anthropology at the Royal Thimphu College in Bhutan.
Hello, I'm Tasneem Siddiqui from Bangladesh, and I'm currently the Executive Director of Refugee and Migratory Movements Research Unit of University of Dhaka.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pratigna Punacha Kodira. I am an assistant professor at the Indian Institute for Human Settlements in Bangalore, India.
Namaskar, I'm Liby Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of Gram Vikas in Odisha, India.
Great. And today we're here coming to you from the Asian Institute of Technology outside of Bangkok in Thailand. And it's our fourth and final day of this consortium meeting for the Success and CLAPS projects. And these projects look at mobility as a potential successful strategy for climate change adaptation. And during this meeting, we've been focusing on reflecting on our approach to research for impact. It's the fourth day. It's a bit warm this morning. How's the energy?
I'm feeling great about it. I mean, it's so wonderful that we all can sit together and think about impact through this project. And yeah, looking good.
Good. Libby, how are you
Things
doing?
are getting warmer.
We're heating up. Good. Tasneem.
I realize lots of work in the next 10 months.
And I'm quite enthralled by the comparative opportunities between the four countries involved here, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and Bhutan.
Fantastic. So before we dive into our discussion, let's situate research for impact within the Climate Adaptation and Resilience program, the CLARE program that your projects are supported through. And just to say that research for impact is really a core element that's, foundational to how the CLARE program has been designed. And the reason for this is at this point in time, we see that research really needs to move from understanding climate risks and vulnerabilities to co-producing strategies for climate action with those research users. So all of the research projects that we're funding through CLARE were really meant to take forward this research for impact or RFRI approach within the projects that they are leading. Now, Pratigna, as one of the research for impact focal points within the research project, can you tell us a bit about how, right from the beginning, the team planned for this research for impact objective within the research that you're leading?
Yeah. So I think for us, the good thing was there was a focus on research for impact from the funder donor sort of objective as well. So even during the proposal stage, it was very clear to us that this is a really important piece. And so we sort of put that in the forefront, even in our proposal, thinking through what our theory of change was going to be, thinking intentionally about who are the partners that we can bring into this project that can operationalize that theory of change. And I think right from that point up to now, where we are almost at the end of the project, impact has always been at the front and center of the way we've thought about this project, including designing the research, thinking of the methods, thinking of the stakeholders that we're going to engage with. And the fact that we have a research for impact focal point, I mean, that also is, I think, the way the project has been designed is quite important. We had a bunch of things that we did. Once we got the project, we also thought about what is that impact narrative we want to have from our project, and that we thought through all the countries that were part of this project. And from the impact narrative, we went on to defining our impact goals, aligned with the broader questions that we were asking. And from there, we worked through what the pathway to achieving that goal would look like. So it was pretty systematic right from the beginning. And I think that helped us walk through the next steps quite easily throughout the project. So in reflecting on this 3 years after we started, I think we've really managed to walk that path and therefore achieved a few things along the way, but also we know that we are going to at least get close to the goals that we started out with.
So that those impact pathways are really guiding
Yes.
the work.
So the way we structured the impact pathway was also in terms of what we can do when we started, what we could do in the immediate 4 to 6 months, and how could we operationalize it in the coming years, but also leaving enough flexibility to accommodate change if at all that came along. And of course, in all our contexts, there's been quite a lot of change in terms of the stakeholders, in terms of priorities, in terms of geopolitics and all of that. But I think the plan to be flexible sort of allowed us to accommodate those changes. So that's worked out. And I think also having a group that looks at research for impact allows us to always come back to this question of what did we think about in the beginning? How is our research allowing us to do that? And sort of bring back the conversation towards impact. And I think that's been quite useful.
That's great. And let's get to some of those impacts that we've seen. Yesterday, we were reviewing some of the exciting impacts to date. So for each of you, I'll ask this. How did this approach of pursuing impact actually play out in your context? What's something exciting you feel you've achieved so far? And Yele, why don't we start with you?
Okay. Thank you. Before addressing that, I think it's important to acknowledge that in the context of Bhutan, research for impact is always preceded or encompassed by a larger question of climate justice, right? Bhutan is carbon negative in its economy, right? And as such, Bhutan has not actively contributed to anthropogenic climate change. Yet, because of its particular geo-ecological climatic setting, Bhutan is disproportionately vulnerable. So when we talk about impact, it's crucially important for us as a project partner as well. But I also feel that talk about impact should not blind us from the larger questions of climate justice. Having said that, what we do in Bhutan with my colleagues at Royal Thimphu College is we try to integrate research findings that link climate change, migration and policy to teaching and learning and research and supervision at the college and university level. In that way, we ensure that the new generation is thinking about these crucially important issues and will have the knowledge and especially the kind of platform and agency to take this forward in terms of policy making, of knowledge creation in the near and not so near future in Bhutan. So in short, I think in the context of an educational institution as we are, one way in which we create impact is through capacity building by integrating project knowledge into curriculum and teaching learning.
So into curriculum at the Royal Thimphu College.
Yes, with possible take-up across the country.
Across the country. Very exciting. And when will that curriculum start rolling out? Be delivered?
Yes, this is part of an interdisciplinary social science undergraduate program, and the success insights are integrated in 3 components, and they will be taught from next year forward, so 2027.
Very exciting. Great. Let's turn to you, Tasneem. Can you speak about some of the exciting impacts in the Bangladesh context?
I'll start from where we come from, Refugee and Migratory Movements Research Unit. It is developed by university teachers, those who didn't want to go into mainstream politics but wanted to change policies and, support actions at the field. So what we did, we formed this research unit, and impact of research was our first, the foremost important task. So any research we get involved into should have a strong component of research impact. So in this particular research program success, we came from the perspective that already we have done few research and few actions. We have developed a national strategy on internal displacement in 2021. Then in 2022, we have developed an action plan to follow that up. And then in 2024, we developed the template for 24 CVF countries so that they can follow Bangladesh example of managing displaced population, those who are affected by climate change, by specific policies and guidelines. So what success did allowed us to take this whole thing by the government. It is the two ministries of the government who took it to COP30 and then placed it before the global audience, as well as to the CVF country.
CVF is
It is climate vulnerable forum states. So there are 74 states. It is the Secretary General who asked Ramru to come up with the template so that it can be replicated all over. So success has provided that opportunity to Ramru to take it, make it global. So that's our impact.
That's really exciting. And at the COP, did any of the representatives from some of those CVF countries approach you or your government with interest in, taking on this template, developing their own national strategies?
It is the CVF Country Forum Secretary General.
Okay.
He is pursuing it. We had couple of meetings after that, and he would like to take this region-wise and do advocacy for this.
Okay.
So Ramru will be part of that advocacy of CVF states, Secretary General, and it will start with Philippines, with the Philippines. So, and that's where as well, it is very much part of success endeavor that we can follow it up into different countries.
This is just another example of Bangladesh at the forefront of this work on climate adaptation. Really exciting. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Libby, can you speak to how you feel impact has been achieved in your context through this project?
So Gramvikas is actually the odd one in the scheme of success and collapse.
How so?
We have nothing to do with research in the way it is traditionally understood. So when IIHS approached us to be a partner, we were apprehensive because traditional research has been kind of accumulating knowledge away from primary stakeholders. And there's always participation of a token kind. But our work is directly with communities, and it's change that happens in the community, which is the impact of work that we all do. That's of primary importance to us. So research methodology is seldom internalized within Gram. So, in that sense, in the last 3 years, what we have experienced is very remarkable. That this project has been professing, witnessing, and acting, and with all the few professors around me, this whole, shift or very conscious strategic shift from professing to witnessing to acting is something that I have experienced and lived through success and collapse. And we looking at at communities that experience both climate change and migration simultaneously, choices that they have to make. It's very different among youth, it's very different among women, it's very different among elders in these communities. So there's a lot of confusion within people about choices that they need to make or that they are forced to make. But at the same time, the larger policy environment in Odisha where we work with is also not completely accepting of the fact that migration is not necessarily bad. Migration is already an adaptation tool that communities apply, but how does the larger system come to accept that? And what this project has helped us do is to start building the narrative around. There have been concrete actions in terms of getting local governments to own up to or to take responsibility for their citizens who migrate. Systems have been built with CMID, the other partner in the project, at a destination in Kerala to strengthen what we had a few years before the project between Gramikas and CMID had started on a corridor approach to enabling safe and dignified migration.
Corridor, you mean from?
Source to the destination.
Okay.
And traditionally what happens is source states, source communities look at where they come from.
Yeah.
Destination states look at the labor force they get because there's migration for work.
Yeah.
And what happens in between?
Yeah.
The lack of security, the lack of dignity that exists in the process of migration is often left out. It's often buried under. So while the remittances that come to the source from the destination is very important, the ability of the source to absorb that remittance and to use that, as we say in Gramikas, using current migration to stop or change the nature of future migration. So how do we create capital, economic, social, and resource capital for communities to take better decisions with respect to migration? And that to me would also be the greatest indicator of how adaptive capacity has been built.
I just want to say, I feel like, each of the organizations that have been part of this project has really brought their strength to the table, and that has enabled us to pursue different kinds of impact.
Yeah.
So in a sense, even the partnerships some of the partnerships are very intentional to bring into this project. For instance, with Gram Vikas and CMID, they already had this work around corridors, and they had a certain sense of this is working, this might work. And I think the research kind of helped provide evidence to see whether is there evidence to really say this is working or not. So there's something that they were working on, and the research kind of provided that evidence. And now we know that it works, and therefore we can push it more confidently to different stakeholders. So I feel like even, for instance, Ramru
being there,
exactly, with all the years of work that you'll have done, and Royal Thimphu College being a university space, and then really moving impact from the education and curriculum building side of it.
Yeah.
I think that's very
I wanted to add another thing, like plan relocation, if you think, never studied either from a very negative perspective or from government perspective, that everything is right. So this success research for the first time gave us enough data to say that plan relocation can be a successful adaptation if right policies of governments are in place. So this research now we are pursuing not only with the government, but also with civil society to make them understand that don't negate, plan relocation. Let us try to make it better, because many people who have lost their homestead, they don't even have a place to sleep.
Right.
So I would say that, the findings of this research, very rich to do this type of action.
Because the people have told you what their experience is, correct?
Yeah.
I have a question. When we think about impact, we often think about policy. And this is based on the assumption that if the policy is right, society is doing what the policy dictates. My discipline is anthropology, including the anthropology of development. And the methods that we use, including participant observation, as we call it, shows, among other things, that what people say they do is often very different from what they actually do. Right? So how can we think about, we all accept that policy interventions are crucial, right? We all accept that. But how can we think about ensuring and accounting for impact beyond the policy paradigm?
That's
it's a question
where-
I struggle with myself,
Yeah.
and I thought maybe our colleagues here.
Yeah, I think that's where you need grassroots level organization from Bikash. Like we have 21 cities, districts, we have our grassroots organization. We call them adaptation right committees. These are local level institutions, school teachers, then union parishad chairman members. They are all there. So you keep on advocating with them. And they are the voice that brings migrant voice, displaced people's voice into larger forum. And that's how policy is taken to the grassroots. And then it gives feedback that if things are not happening, that's their protest and other things come in. So it's all together. It's not one. And it's not a one-time intervention. It is an intervention continuously going on. Doesn't matter if the project ends, there will be new project. You keep on pursuing the goal.
We'll come back to that in a bit. Libby, was there anything you wanted to add in response to Yele's question?
I quite agree with what
Yeah.
Yele has said about what I think this whole definition of what policy is. My question is often that I keep asking myself and in our work is the citizen the subject or the object or the anchor of the policy? And that to me is often not clarified. We do research, we accumulate knowledge, we process it, and we build the picture of what is ideal on behalf of the citizen. Where do we ground truth it? And when you say grassroots organizations, community institutions are needed, we are doing a part of that ground truth. But we also find in India's case, a lot of policy formulations reach the government in terms of what is to be done. But governments being what government is, what is not sufficient? There is also need for the how of it.
How that needs to be done.
So the what and the how both demonstrated, and the what can come from research findings, but the how can only come from laboratories of action. So
I think
in many ways,
yeah.
what Success Collabs is doing is bringing this together.
Yeah.
Again, I think, for instance, Libby is always playing the devil's advocate in our group. So, and IHS, for instance, looks at policy change, and so does another ISIMOD, for instance, looks at policy change. And I think different organizations have different levels of engaging. And I think what we've also been able to leverage as a group is this questioning of how we can do this better. So we have a certain idea. Libby and CMID will ask us to think a little bit more from what does it really mean to look at it ground up. So I think just keeping each other's experiences and perspectives in check, but also expanding that perspective has been quite useful through the partnerships in this project and the kind of organizations that are in this group.
Yeah, and building on your respective networks.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of accountability
Yeah.
of research.
Yeah, true. We're talking about a lot of the successes, some of the particularities of policy versus, on the ground impact. But I thought it would be useful also to reflect on some of the barriers or challenges you faced trying to achieve impact and how you went about navigating these challenges. Libby, do you want to jump in on this one?
I would say there are only challenges. There isn't a pass through the mountain that you can go through yet. The whole idea is to carve that path so that we can go through faster and easy. Migration and climate in the context of Odisha where we were, migration is a distress, so the state believes migration need to be stopped because it is a violation of fundamental human rights. But citizens believe it's a fundamental right to move. Now we have destination states in the country in the same constitutional frame, which are asking citizens of India located in another state in the union to prove their nativity. So be it at the source, be it at the destination, policy actions, not policy on paper, policy action, administrative action, often looks at migration as something that is undesirable. The world, this universe has been built on migration. So all of a sudden, and you see it politically across the world.
World over.
Maybe you know more about it in the global scale. But so this challenge in the case of internal migration is something that really needs to be addressed. The second element of that is my peers, my compatriots in the civil society share this. They see the distress. They believe it's a failure of the state that citizens are having to migrate. Few are willing to see the positives of migration. The research that we've done together with CMID, we know that huge amount of remittances, new money is coming into local economies. Where is this money going? It's circulating in the economy. There is so much local economic development happening, but a migrant worker who's returned with a certain amount of capital today, if they want to invest it in a business, banks are not willing to lend additional capital. So you have suboptimal results with a huge pool of potential capital lying there. So both at the level of policy, at the level of action, there are many things that we need to redefine, reimagine for this to work. And that to me is the continuing task.
Central to the work of success and collapse around changing the narrative on migration.
Yeah.
Tasneem, in your work, what do you feel, in the context of what you've been trying to achieve with success and collapse, what are some of these barriers or challenges you've faced?
I think during the 2014, 15, 16, the type of barrier you were saying was there.
Okay.
It's like those who are climate experts, they would just use migrant as a threat to developed countries by saying that if you don't do anything for climate change, these people will end up at your country. Then it is our advocacy. We had this part of non-traditional security discourse, that's the 11 grantees of Ford Foundation. With that, what we did, we tried to change the narrative with those climate experts. So these climate experts of Bangladesh, Salimul Haq, then Atik Rahman, Nishad, Ainul Nishad. So all these we brought into our project and then continuously started saying that you cannot use migrant as threat because they are the victims. So you change your narrative. And they all gradually changed over the years. Now they talk about safe and sustainable cities. So the narrative has changed in the context of Bangladesh. Now, what is the problem? What is the challenge is the urban areas. No? The way they are living in urban areas, it's a kind of human security point of view. It's maybe economically they are doing better, but then their hygiene, their health, and the housing condition is very poor. So that's where when you want to work, all the government functionaries would say, oh, no, don't make anything permanent. They should go back to their countries, their places of origin. So then what we did, continuously bring in these policymakers and tell them, where are you from? So he'll say he's from some other place. And where did you do your studies? These and these places. And then why do you think migration is right for you and wrong for them?
Make it personal.
And when you make it personal, then all these government functionaries at the end start saying that actually I am a migrant. So when you bring that realization and then try to continuously pursue, they have equal right to take benefit of whatever development is taking in the country, like you. So when you bring this right-based discourse, then they don't have much to say. And they realize that urban locations should be better locations. And then you don't only work with government functionaries, you have to work with mayors of the cities, And mayor of the cities are more concerned because they want more power vis-a-vis policymakers and bureaucrats. So you talk about power of mayors, and that brings the mayors with us and say, okay, our job is only to look after this. We want to include people in the urban locations. We want to do things for them. So you bring in different groups into the game, and you keep on continuously trying to change the discourse in favor of the migrants. We have changed the National Adaptation Plan. There where urban migrants were seen as, petty theft, drug smuggling, road, capturing this type of population. They need to go back. Now there is this change in the National Adaptation Plan that was drafted in 2023, saying that movement is essential part of rural urban development and continuum, and we must accommodate migration as well as we must take decentralization seriously so that megacities are not manned by a lot of people, but work is all over the country. So migration will be to secondary cities, peri-urban locations. So that's where debate is changing continually. It is tough, but we keep on continuing to do that.
That's part of this advocacy journey here on. Yeah.
And I just want to again reflect on the intention of the larger project. Was one of the big intentions was narrative change. And we've heard from Gramvika CMID, we've heard from Ramru, and also the different work that we're doing across the country. I think there are different levels at which we are approaching. So some may be at a very, very local level, and some may be at the national and even the global regional level. So, but the intent is on narrative change, and you can achieve narrative change either through, journalist workshops that we've been trying to do both locally, but also regionally across Nepal and India, or you can work directly with policymakers, you can work with students. So I think when you have an impact goal in mind, the paths to that goal can be multiple, drawing on the strengths and opportunities that arise at that moment. But I want to go back to what you were talking about, what you were asking about barriers. And like I can reflect from the design side of barriers. So in many projects that we do, the impact piece is not such a central piece. And there are just few donors and funders and projects that think about impact as a very central element of what we do. Many of the projects are
just research.
Exactly, for the sake of doing research and generating knowledge, which is also important. But I don't know, maybe in climate change, there is no luxury to just think about generating knowledge and think about, what the impact of that knowledge is going to be later. But so in many of the project, barrier is also not having imagined the time to think about it and the resources to do this, make this happen, like many a times doing workshops with policymakers or journalists take money and take time and resources. And unless you've accounted for it, it cannot be an add-on at the end of your project. It will not, the project design will not allow you to do that. So, I think in this particular project program and the bunch of people that we are together with, being intentional has helped us overcome some of those barriers.
Right from the start.
Right from the start.
Because your imagination was already set and some of the supports and resources were in place. I want to pick up on what you were talking about, the challenge of changing the narrative, and just go to you, Yella, because we haven't had a chance to hear. And I know in the Bhutanese context, this story of migration is deeply concerning. And so how to talk about migration as a potential adaptation strategy in the context when the framing of migration is deeply concerning at the level of your country. How did you navigate that? How have you been
success
navigating that?
has inserted itself in a larger debate. And at the two ends of this debate is on the one hand a fear about rural depopulation. So origin places becoming less and less livable and sustainable, right? And there is a clear need to think, based on what the data tells us, about rural futures that are not necessarily agrarian. So that's a completely different way of thinking about what the future might hold in a rural area. And the other end of the debate is the migration of productive Bhutanese youth, many of them are students, to places like Australia, where they are spending their most productive years. So these are the two kind of ends of a larger debate in the context of Bhutan. And success is part of that debate in terms especially of internal migration. Some of the barriers or the kind of thinking we need to do is that most dominant policy thinking assumes that populations are fairly static, that populations stay in place. However, the evidence that we have gathered shows almost the opposite, right? So policy in a way is static, while population is dynamic. I think that is one way that that we need to think. Another one is that scholarship in Bhutan has revealed a great deal of knowledge about climate change, a great deal of knowledge about migration. These are both topics that elicit innovative research, but success is the first kind of initiative in the country that explicitly says we need to know about the relationship between the two, right? And that's easier said than done, right? It's not that you can just write these two knowledge bodies into one another, that you can almost like a cyborg, that you can merge them. A lot of thinking is to be done there. A third barrier, which is perhaps something that we need to think a bit more about academically, is that in a exciting consortium that we operate in, we identify certain key terms, right? And these key terms are articulated in a particular language, which is English, right? And we then have a difficult, in a way necessary task of translating these concepts, adaptive capacity, right, well-being. In Bhutan, well-being has a very distinctive meaning because of His Majesty's the Fourth King introduction of cross-national happiness, right? So what well-being means in the context of Bhutan is not necessarily the same as it is in the context of India. And these are important, almost epistemological problems we need to think about at some level, right? So this is a bit of a tension, I think a productive tension, right? If we want to collaborate across countries, which we all want and which we all say is necessary, and this project proves that it is so necessary to have these partnerships, especially in the learning that is happening across, we should not lose sight on the possibility that even though we are speaking in English, we are still not necessarily speaking in the same language. Right? And I think this is another barrier that we need to think with.
Navigate. Yeah.
If I may,
Sure.
at a global level, I see there are barriers, no? Like, since many of the researches are determined by donor funding availability, you do see donor would like to treat displacement, climate-related displacement, in the context of humanitarian aid. But then IPCC now has accepted that displacement in the context of climate change is very much a development issue. So development funds should go there. But that's a big barrier everywhere to fight at a national level. Please bring in resources for displaced people is a barrier. But I'm sure another 3-4 years down the lane, this barrier will be merged. So integration, what he talked about, another big problem at a global level, you have SDG, you have Climate Trust Fund, and then again you have UNDRR Fund. Then combining these three, an integrated approach is completely lacking because all these are fortress and they would like to have their own project. And at the end, it is duplication, multiplication of fund. So these are the international barriers that we South Asian or those who are at the receiving end face.
you're speaking to this sort of longer game, which is a perfect segue to my last question, colleagues, which is, we know that this project has an end date. By the end of 2026 and shortly into 2027, this research will wrap up. But Ram Vikas is not going away. RTC is not leaving. Ramru is there. So what is an impact that you feel will either outlive this project or something that you'll continue to take forward in the work that you do related to this issue of mobility in climate change adaptation? Maybe I'll go back to you, Gele.
Okay. There will be plenty. First off, as part of the Success Project, we are engaged in capacity building through a PhD. So Kinley Dorji, known to all of us very well, is thinking about migration as adaptation in the form of a PhD. And this is going to be not just a PhD for him, this is hopefully likely going to be a career. Right? So in Bhutan, he will be continuing this thinking. Secondly, we are integrating success, as mentioned, success, insights, data, narratives into curricula. They will be taught not till this year. They will start next year after the project, and they will be taught for several years, hopefully for quite a long time. Thirdly, in terms of publication, we have collected a very rich, a very exciting data set, of which we have at the moment, even with the papers we are currently publishing, probably we are touching 15 or 20% of the data, right? There is an endless data set that, of a very rich data set that is available. We are in conversation with the government of sharing this data set to the larger research community in Bhutan, so that it can be taken in different directions, and also really in the spirit of that research should be open access. Research should be available to whoever requires it for purposes that are good, right? That are beneficial to the greater good. So that's another way in which this project will continue to live. I think in fact, the moment the project ends, it will end as a little child, but it will continue to grow and becomes much more mature way after the project closes. That's what I foresee.
Jasmine.
There are many attempts where we will integrate the findings of success. First, we have projects, grassroots level projects. Yeah? There, what we have already done, some of the findings, the training manual that we have prepared for different groups, like those who provide services to the displaced, all government functionaries at a local level, then displaced population, then those who are at the risk of displacement, and planned relocation site people. For them, we have training programs to how to, protect your rights and how to take from the state what is rightfully yours in the context of development. So that training manual we will be continuing our training for quite a while. Yeah? That, of course, it will change here and there a little bit, but that's the foundation that we have developed from here will continue in 21 areas, climate hotspot areas. Then you have, at a national level, we are doing a big program in October, and that big program is bringing in policymakers and then bringing all the success researchers and preaching them. It will be a new government. Yeah. So preaching them that this is the finding, this is the reality. Don't think in terms of sending them back, or don't think that planned relocation is just a one-time intervention of yours. You have to have maintenance, you have to have collective action and other things built in. So if we can do that with this upcoming government, and I'm sure there are a lot of trust fund, this fund, with government in collaboration, we can apply for those. And already from the Ministry of Disaster, they have asked us to come and jointly develop a project for Climate Trust Fund. So that way we would like to continue. And there is like research you said, so many of those who were working are now, like Tamim is doing his PhD. Then so many are real one coming back, and many of them are university teachers. So they are taking it back to the curricula, to the students, and we have a young researchers forum in the university. So that young researchers forum will definitely keep on doing work at the university level.
Great. There's a bunch of things I want to say actually. Tasneem, you were reminding us yesterday in the meeting that projects will come and go, but
Yes.
the work of organizations and the work that different organizations are doing will continue, and I think that is so true, because just because this is the end of a project cycle, it doesn't mean that we will stop the work that we're doing and jump onto something else. Having said that, I feel like partnerships is one thing that definitely will go forward, because building partnerships, building relationships take a lot of time and effort, and it takes years into developing those relationships, and only after all those years you may actually start to see something very fruitful come out of it. And we've seen this from our past project. We've had partners. Only those relationships have strengthened in this project, and continuing it will move on that way to achieve more impact. So that will for sure continue. But the other thing is, I mean, even before we started the project, like CMID and Gram Vikas in the case of India, already were thinking about this idea of corridors. Right? They've been working on the South Odisha and Central Kerala corridor, and we came in with the research to sort of strengthen those aspects, and we also through this project brought in the aspect of futures thinking through foresight, and that's something that ISIMO was leading on, and a lot of partners have together started thinking about this whole using foresight method to think about the future, and that's something I think we can really use to push forward together. Yeah, so I think those are the things we'll take forward. But before you finish, I know you said it was the last question. I do have a question for you.
Should we hear from Libby and then come
after
back?
that,
Okay,
perhaps.
great. And I'm so glad you brought up the foresight piece, because even that, with all of your stakeholders, you've done this future, this look to the future. And if Amina was here, I know she would be speaking about that in Nepal and how that's been introduced to the other countries in which you've worked. So I'm glad that we acknowledge that methodology that was used. But Libby, let's hear from you. What's something that that will outlive the project or that you'll continue to be working on?
I think what's been said so far is also what I think will happen. But let me put it in a different way, because my work primarily, day work, is a lot around water.
Okay.
And to me, it's about streams coming together to form a river. And it has to be a river that's large enough to be a river of national importance. Right now, a lot of what we do is a small stream. Success Collapse is bringing in a much larger stream to join in. And, I'm hoping that the new river that's formed is wide enough, is large enough for the country to take, the state of Odisha to take notice of, so that it remains a river of knowledge, a river of action, a river of evidence for the state and its people, civil society, to take note. And that to me is what, in 2021, when we started speaking about this project in its first avatar, our work with CMID, Ramika CMID joint work on migration was very early. By the time the CLAPS project started, we had progressed a fair bit. And today I'm very confident that with the knowledge, the evidence, and the partnerships that have come in through CLAPS and Success, I do see that the river is broadening, the river is deepening, and the volume of water will become not so insignificant.
To be perennial. It's a
It will always be.
But that's such a wonderful visual and analogy to go back to. I mean, that's really inspiring.
Thanks, Libby. You had a question.
Yes. And my question to you was, okay, we're all, grantees of this work, and we've been moving forward, the way we'd imagine it. But what about you guys from the funder donor side? It's a lot to learn from that as well.
yeah, there's a lot to learn from you all, and I really appreciate you sharing your lessons, your experiences, and it's so inspiring to hear the legacy that this work has supported and has seeded. I think we have learned a lot of humility in the expectations we have for these kinds of projects. Your project is exceptional, and I think it's because we have to recognize that you're building on past relationships. You've had the opportunity to work together, some of you. There's a lot of trust. There's a lot of networks that you can mobilize for this work. And so your project has, really been able to move things forward, to work towards this river that Libby spoke about. And other projects are, they're in that foundational stage of setting those partnerships. So the impacts that they will be able to achieve might be less. It might be more their first step. And, while we can accompany them and support them and encourage them to be engaging with the critical stakeholders, those who will use the research along the way, I think we also have to have the recognition that these things do take time. So we have seen that, but I think we remain optimistic that, optimistic or convinced that unless you, from the outset, put up front that this research is meant to meet a need, that is meant to go beyond papers and reports sitting on shelves, then it's not fair to the researchers that we support. So we put that expectation right up front, and through the work of facilitating peer learning, coming back to this struggle of research for impact as a broader community of research projects. I hope that we have helped nudge that impact and keep up the energy for that. And I know, for example, some of the methodologies that your project brought to the table have been really inspirational. We had earlier discussions about the use of photo voice, how it was used in Bangladesh, which I know sparked imagination for some of the other research teams. They were able to take that on in their work as a methodology. So I think we've learned, to set those expectations, to set that ambition, to support that ambition, and to help use the community of researchers across Asia, Pacific, across Africa, to continue to sort of inspire one another to overcome some of the challenges that we just know will crop up, Yeah. So I hope that that answers your question.
And we all wish that this project continues for the second phase.
Noted.
Let there be more success.
Yes.
Thank you so much for this conversation today. You've all been so eloquent and so generous with your sharing, and I know it will be of great interest to those who are interested in the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.